we're going to get right to the program today. You know, at the heart level, retirees want to know they are stewarding their hard-earned financial resources to the best of their ability. However, many plans forget to methodically and intentionally prepare the next steward. In this podcast, Ben Taatjes will detail the difference between a wealth transfer plan and an estate plan. And he's going to give you ways to make sure your heirs get the best from you while you are still alive. Enjoy this episode. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. So glad that you're joining us here on Retire Repurpose. Jared Sebesta here, and as I mentioned on the top of many of our previous podcasts over the last several weeks, we have some new listeners, and I just want to give you a quick little introduction as to what we talk about on this show. Obviously, with the title of the podcast, Retire Repurposed, we are talking about retirement. But we pride ourselves that we're taking a much different angle on retirement. We kind of look at it from the anti-societal way, where retirement is now all about a financial conversation, and it's about your life and in your leisure. We believe that there's a different way. In fact, we talk about rethinking and reimagining retirement. What if retirement could actually be the most impactful season of your life, the one where you crescendo, where it's a new beginning, where you actually see the most fruit of your life during your retirement. For you to do that, you've got to walk into a new opportunity, a new way of living, not the one that society is going to give you, where it's now focused all about you and your leisure and all about you, really is what it comes down to. We want you to repurpose yourself, find a new dimension to walk into. And when you do that, it's going to feel a lot different. And it's going to look a lot different than what society has been teaching and preaching you. So on today's show, we're going to talk about money, which is something we don't typically talk about on this particular show, but we're going to talk about how you can view your money, your wealth, and how to pass that on to the next generation. Our mantra is actually time, talent, and treasure. In fact, in our financial firm, our goal is to help retirees and pre-retirees steward their time, their talent, and their treasure. Most of the retirement conversation, like I said, is focused on the financials, but we really want to focus on the life of the retiree, the time aspect, the purpose side, but the financials is also a major point of that show. If you have missed any of the last several shows, I encourage you to go back. If you're new to us, go back, listen to the last several shows, back it up maybe 6 to 12 episodes, because you're really going to get the foundation of what we believe retirement should be all about. And I would challenge you, if you've never heard this before, it's going to give you a bit of a paradigm shift as to what you think your retirement should be all about. Again, thank you for joining us on this show. We're going to talk about wealth transfer plans, and the very first part of that is preparing the next steward. Ben Taatjes joins me on the show now, and Ben, last week we talked about some foundational truths regarding kind of your stuff and your life. We talked about, really identifying the finality of life, because really at the end of the day, there's some things that people have to kind of get into their head when it comes to their life and their money.
Yeah, Jared, there's never too early of a time to start thinking about that. I think, yes, we're gearing more towards retirees, but, I think everybody should have these same types of questions you should be asking yourself, the same outlook on life to say, we don't know how long we're going to live. Tomorrow could be it. I told that story about one of my clients who had kind of given me, hey, I've got 4 years to live. In his mind, that was, hey, all my family, the men in our family tend to die at age 84. And he was age 80 or whatever it was. And I remember asking him, so it's like 3 to 4 years. And it's a finite time. How do you look at every day? And he made the comment, he says, well, the same way you should, Ben, is you don't know if you have tomorrow or the next day. And I try to look at life that way. So, all of these questions in the finite part of life, knowing I will die, the stuff I have, it won't be coming with me. Those are realities everybody has to think through. And it's really important no matter what stage of life you're in.
Yeah. One of the takeaways I took away from last week is we talked about how we put our identity in our stuff and how much we, I don't want to say hoard, but hold on to these things that we've accumulated. And you're really pressing people in meetings to think about not only their life in context, but their stuff. And you said that it's really challenging for people sometimes to get over that mental hump of saying, you know what, my stuff isn't going to be my stuff all the time. And that really challenges people because perhaps they find their identity and so much value in the things they've acquired.
Yeah, it helps just to picture somebody else with your stuff, and usually, that helps get people on the mindset of, yes, this is only a period of time that I'm going to have whatever it is I have. I can remember trying to set context too with one of my daughters once. This is years ago, but I remember they were so upset about something. I think it was an American Girl doll that one of my daughters had. It had either the sister had played with it, or I don't remember what it was, but I remember they're so upset with how much it was their doll. And I can remember telling her, I said to one of my daughters, said, you have to realize that I don't have anything in my life today that I had when I was 10 or 12 or 15. There is no physical thing that is still here. The people are there, but there's nothing tangible, physical, there's no stuff that I have anymore. So take a look at it from that perspective, right? And I think it's helps you simplify it and say, the things that are so important to me today will not even be in my life, whether it be 3, 5, 10 years from now. We know, the Bible says that, don't store up treasure where on earthly things where moth and rust destroy. That's the reality of everything that we have. So we have to start there.
Yeah. And again, I don't think that it's bad to have things and have stuff like that. But I love how what you're suggesting is it gets down to the heart level as to, do these things define us. I've heard it pointed out another way. I have kids a little bit younger than you, Ben, and they want to go to the mall, and I've kind of had the daddy talk with them, and I say, there's really nothing in that mall that you can buy that you will care about in 10 years, probably not even in a year. In fact, anything in that mall that you can buy, chances are within a year, there's about an 80% chance it's going to be in the garbage. And again, that's not to diss stuff and things, but I think, it's just kind of natural instinct. We want to hold on to things, and maybe perhaps as we get closer to death, we're kind of hanging on. And I think that, that heart tie is what we're trying to get at, and some of that can be unhealthy.
Yeah, and those things, even if they are in our lives for a short period of time, they're okay as long as they're looked at as the means. Kind of like money, right? Sure. Money, the income side of money, it's means to get you something. It should not be the end goal. Like I live my life or I put my self-worth in that as the end. It is just the means. So are those things bad in and of themselves? No.
Yeah.
But can they be? If they become the end goal, then yes.
Yeah. Someone will get my stuff at some point. That was one of the 5 fundamental truths about your life and in your stuff that we talked about last week. Again, if you missed last week's show or any of our previous episodes, please go back and listen to that, because all of these kind of build on each other, and that's going to take us really nicely into today's show. Ben, we're talking about wealth transfer plans, and this is kind of maybe step 1 of 2 or 3 when it comes to this. I think this whole idea of a wealth transfer plan, I think let's just spend some time and break this down. We know what it means. We've talked about it on shows past. Again, we have a financial firm that where this is part of kind of the process of helping retirees, but let's just kind of break down to someone who maybe hasn't heard this term before, what a wealth transfer plan actually is.
Yeah, well, I think it's easiest to kind of look at what it is to say what it's not. I think when people hear of typical your end of life planning, they look at an estate plan. And what I want to do is I want to highlight the differences between what we call a wealth transfer plan and what you might say, you go work with an attorney for an estate plan. We're talking about here a lot of mindset shift that is very different than what you might have heard. And specifically what we're talking about today, after we kind of look at the two, is where I want to start. The biggest difference, I think, Jared, between a wealth transfer and estate plan is the wealth transfer really focuses on, and really the impact on the ultimate beneficiary is of the highest priority. That's the most important thing. Many times in an estate plan, you look at more of the impact on the donor, and the estate is the highest priority. So you're looking at yourself versus who's going to actually your children and the ultimate beneficiary.
So just talk about that for a second. What does that look like? I don't want to say a real life example, but what would be an example of passing down wealth through a wealth transfer plan versus a typical estate plan?
Well, you're going to look much more deeply at who's going to get your stuff. You're going to look at the timing, and you're going to look at each individual differently. You're going to look at them and say, what's the best case scenario, right? And sometimes what's the worst case scenario. But many times I think an estate plan misses that piece. An estate plan just comes together and it's like, all right, we've got to divvy up our stuff. It's equal to each kid, or it's, here's what we're going to do with it. It's going to start at death. This is how it's going to work. A wealth transfer plan is completely different in that you are more so focused on the beneficiary.
Sure. Is it fair to say a wealth transfer plan is all about them, or what's best for them and their timing, and an estate plan is more about what's best for me in my plan and my timing, meaning my death? It seems kind of a superficial way and maybe a harsh way to look at it, but is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, I think so. And then there are good estate plans out there that look at these pieces. But I think that when we talk to clients about efficiently and the most, the best way to pass your wealth on, we look at it through the lens of wealth transfer. What's the best thing for the ultimate beneficiary? How is the ultimate, your next steward prepared for what they're going to get?
Gotcha. We got 5 of these. What's the second one?
Well, I think the second one is a wealth transfer plan begins today. And an estate plan tends to start at death. So more of the tools and techniques that are used with the wealth transfer is going to begin much, much earlier and carry on while you're still living, whereas the estate plan really starts at death.
Yeah, so talk about that for a second. Again, I think this not probably, but maybe catches some people off guard, where, again, I can imagine you working with our clients, and they may be perfectly healthy, and now you're having conversations with them about starting to offload perhaps some of their wealth and their things. Perhaps, how does that land with people?
Well, usually pretty well. It takes a little while to get them, to think through the differences, right? And I just want to make sure people today here and our clients here, when we talk about this, is don't think that, really the transfer of your wealth should start at death, right? Well, the will takes over, or the trust, whatever instrument you're using, and now your kids or charities or whoever gets the stuff. We want to make sure the wealth transfer plan is starting today. And when they hear that and they think, oh, now I can get some of the enjoyment of seeing my kids use the assets earlier. I can get some of the both income tax and enjoyment benefits from seeing charities get the money sooner. Remember, most of the people we're dealing with, Jared, have, as we've talked about before, if we know the total of what they're stewarding and we know that there's plenty of income there for them, and we have that definitive income plan, we know there's something left over. Yeah. So why not get the benefit and really the joy of seeing the giving to charity, or the benefit of seeing your kids use the money when they need it? Remember, Jared, the average inheritance today, Jared, 64 years old. What that means is when most people get their quote-unquote inheritance is 64. Yeah. So sometimes people are like, I'm waiting on my life. Someday I'm going to get this inheritance, then I'll start living. Most of your life will be long over by then. So again, we're trying to make sure that kids can start to benefit from that, because many of them can use it right now. Yeah.
And you bring up a really good point, because one of the questions that you want to have answered before you get to this point of your retirement stewardship plan is how much is enough. Because I think a lot of people may say, well, you want me to start giving away my money now? I need that. Like, what if I run out? Well, we've covered that through the process of identifying very specifically how much you're going to need. So again, reiterate that point on how important it is to really understand that you're not giving, quote unquote, your money away. You're giving away the excess of it, and you can have both ends. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, you should have both, where you can look at and say, okay, here's the amount that I've kind of set aside. I mean, by the way, whenever you look at your stuff, back to last week's show, and you can hold your hands open, say, okay, this is stuff I'm not going to use anyway. There's a bunch of money that I know I'm not going to need. Why not let them enjoy it now? Because again, that freedom of releasing your hands and saying, holding things more open, we ultimately know God owns it all. Sure. So why not let the kids have some of that part earlier if you are if you really are confident in the plan that's already there.
Yeah, I mean, again, it sounds kind of harsh, but you can kind of imagine, an adult child or an adult family, and they've got this inheritance that's kind of waiting for them. They need it now. the mom and dad are still healthy, but at the same time, there's kind of this battle of like, I could really use that, but they don't have a wealth transfer plan. They have an estate plan, so I won't be able to get it till mom or dad dies. But you don't want that, So like, again, that's why I see how this is such a better solution in a lot of ways, because we're not waiting for somebody to pass before we can start benefiting. Again, to your point, your heirs and your charities need the money now, and again, to your point, once again, the average beneficiary is 64 years old, probably long past the point at which it's really useful. You know what I'm saying? Like most families, could really use that inheritance perhaps, and when they're in their 30s and building a family, and then by the time they're 64 years old, perhaps they need it less. So again, the impact goes down, even though the amount actually might be more. You know what I'm saying? So I think, again, it's just kind of unlearning this whole idea of how you pass wealth down to the next generation. Is there a better way? And I think that's really the crux of this conversation. Let's go on to number 3.
Yeah, so a wealth transfer plan is more stewardship driven, and an estate plan would be more tax efficiency driven. Now, don't hear me that, with your wealth transfer plan, it isn't going to be tax efficient. In fact, I think some of the real benefits, certainly on income tax side, come from doing some of certainly the charitable giving while we're living versus at death.
Yeah.
But I think the focus is when we look at stewardship, a key component is preparing the next steward. Generational wealth is a problem. It is. I mean, in fact, I think that the term in itself, generational wealth, when people don't create for themselves what they live on, when they don't create for their own families what they use, I think for many people that can cause a problem. So generational wealth in and of itself is not bad, but I think without parameters and without the proper lens of stewardship, it can create problems.
So again, preparing the next steward, that's a huge part of this. And we're going to have some questions here in a couple of minutes for you to ask yourselves and maybe your family about this, and that will kind of get to the heart as to how you can best steward those resources to your heirs and your family. Ben, what's number 4?
I feel like a wealth transfer plan is more God-honoring, and an estate plan would be more self-honoring. And what I mean by that is when you look at your wealth, again, as open-handed, you look at your things as if, okay, God, you own it all. What's best for everyone, charity, children, and myself? I think you can honor God and be a far better steward than saying, hey, I'm going to hold on to everything and really keep it for my own use and pleasure until death and then pass it on. I think that can be a very self-honoring way to go about the plan. We had
a show titled, this is probably a year or two ago, You Can't Give When You're Dead, and that was to date one of the most popular podcasts we've ever done. But we talked about this exact thing, and in that podcast you said you can't give money away when you're dead. It's not truly giving. Do you still stand by that that statement?
Well, you can't give a real gift where there's sacrifice. I mean, it's so easy, I think, to give when there's absolutely no sacrifice there. And to that point is, if you're dead, you don't need the money anymore. It does you no good. So if you're holding on until the very end, so that way you can die and then I don't need it, then it can go to somebody else, that's not a truly sacrificial good gift. That is, I guess you could look at it, that's money your kids give away because they don't get to use it anymore. But no, I don't think it's possible for you to make that decision after you're dead to say, yep, now I'm going to get this gift is going to happen, and therefore it's truly a gift.
Yeah. Again, we're not suggesting that if you have an estate plan and plan on giving away money or assets away when you die, that it's bad. But again, is there a better way? Is there a better way to honor the recipients? Better way to honor yourself, your legacy, and honor the wealth that you've accumulated in a better way? And I think that's kind of the heart level is what we're trying to get at here today. Ben, what's number 5?
Yeah, last one, again, we've touched on this, but I think it's important to hear that a wealth transfer plan starts to transfer ownership now whereas an estate plan kind of retains control until later, until death. So a key differentiator is starting now versus later.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into what you call the wisdom principle. We've really laid out what the difference is between a wealth transfer plan and a will or an estate plan. But this wisdom principle needs to be kind of talked about, and I think this is a really good place to fill that in.
Yeah, and this isn't my own. I learned about this through my certified Kingdom Advisor work with the Kingdom Advisor Group. Phenomenal information, and I can remember it really clearly. The writer said that you have to realize whenever you're developing a transfer plan, a wealth transfer plan to get finances to the next generation, that you can never pass wealth without passing wisdom. Wisdom may create wealth, but wealth does not guarantee wisdom. I'll say it again. Never pass wealth without passing wisdom. Wisdom may create wealth, but wealth does not guarantee wisdom. And when we talk about preparing the next steward, that is so key, Jared, to realize that when you pass wealth on without the wisdom piece, you can actually do more harm than good.
Yeah, and again, we're going to get to some questions here in just a second that will start to answer some of those questions for yourself. But you see this, and again, the example that comes to mind, for me and maybe for some of you is like, somebody wins the lottery, right? Where they didn't, I don't want to say didn't earn it, but they kind of didn't. They didn't earn that. They don't have the capacity or the wisdom, probably is a better word, to handle that type of wealth, and it either gets lost abruptly and maybe painfully, and or it does damage, to the person. And again, you've seen this happen, time and time again. Maybe not you personally, but you've seen it play out here in America, where somebody wins the lottery and they get a huge sum of money, and it actually is kind of the downward spiral of their life. And again, to your point here with this wisdom principle, just because you get a large sum of money doesn't mean that you get the wisdom along with it to be able to handle that.
Yeah, no, to the same point, I think money tends to accentuate or amplify who you are as a person. So if you were more of a selfish person, you were somebody that really tried to hoard everything, hold on to everything, and then you get a bunch more, that's only going to make it worse, right? If you were a giving person typically, and you were a person that already looked at money in the right way, and then you get a bunch more, that should continue. But that's why we're saying you have to prepare through good, godly wisdom, and you look at money a certain way, again, as the means, not the end, and have somebody ready to really receive those assets. That is so important. So again, make sure you're passing the wealth, but you've passed on the wisdom first, not the other way around.
Well, it sounds really stupid, but you can't do that after you die. That's why these wealth transfer plans are so important, because it lays out a time frame for you to be able to pass along wisdom with the wealth as well. Let's get into a couple questions here as we wrap this up here in the next few minutes that people can ask themselves, or donors can ask themselves about their family and their wealth.
Yeah, I think just first of all, realize that your kids are all unique. So when you look at passing money to your children, look at them individually. Ask yourself the question: is if your child received your wealth today, what would be the best and the worst possible outcome? That's a hard question, Jared. It is a hard thing to really take stock in. Okay, where are my kids at today? And they're all gonna be different, but what's the best and the worst? And then you kind of follow that up. And you say, okay, if this is indeed one of the best or worst situations, how serious is it? And then how likely is it? So yes, there may be a specific reason why a kid shouldn't get a bunch of wealth, but it's a very remote chance. Okay, so then put less stock in that. But sometimes it's very clear. Yeah, this is a very likely outcome. So we do have to put parameters around if that's the case. Yeah,
I'm a parent to young kids, and a lot of kids are, my kids be like, that's not fair. He got this and she got that. And I've used lines from this show that we've talked about with my own parenting, where I'll say, what is fair isn't always equal. The way that I parent you and give you what's best for you may not be exactly equal to your brother or your sister. But I think we have to get over this whole idea, and I think parents and people who have wealth to give away need to get over that when it comes to their children. What is best may not always be equal. Fair isn't going to equal in every situation, right?
No, you love them uniquely. They're different. So I think you should handle this process uniquely to each child.
Right.
And they are different. So they can be looked at differently, and yet it can still be and create the best outcome.
Yeah, we've got about 30 seconds left. We're going to dive deeper into wealth transfer. What can we expect from you and from us next week?
We're going to take this a little bit deeper, Jared. I think a big part of every plan needs to be communication. So that's going to, first of all, look like great communication and complete alignment with your spouse, and then the eventual communication of this plan to your adult children.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.